Thursday's lesson. The lesson points out that the Bible records the history of people not only to give us historical events, but to demonstrate to us from history how faith changes lives and brings victory. What is faith? Okay? And very simply, faith is trust, confidence, belief, devotion that leads to action. That's what faith is.
Based on evidence.
Yeah, but we didn't ask what it was based on. Okay, we just said what it is.
Definition. All
okay,
right.
So, but it is. Our biblical faith is based on evidence. But instead of going through that, because I've been through that many times in the Hebrew and the Greek word of hypostasis and so forth, we're not going to go through that. What I want to do this time is talk about how faith led to action that led to victory in God's people and the people's life from Hebrews chapter 11, where the lesson points our attention. And we're going to go through the lives listed, and I want you to notice the story. Paul not only lists the lives, but he's listing them, describing what we're talking about. How the battle between Christ and Satan is waging, between God's forces to bring the Messiah and Satan's forces trying to obstruct the Messiah, and those who trust God can continually defeat Satan's attempt to shut down the avenue for Messiah in order for Messiah to come. So let's look at this. And this is how they're listed in order by the writer of Hebrews. Abel. These are all the people who are victorious by faith. Abel, we already discussed how he trusted God and cooperated with God for the healing of his own heart and taught the plan of salvation to bring Messiah, and how Satan worked against the truth, inspired Cain to kill him, closing or shutting down that source of truth and light. Enoch, we see God's ultimate plan. Those who trust God and walk with him are cured of sin, given immortal life, and taken from the world of sin. This is the promise we receive in Jesus, in the Messiah. Noah. Satan worked to harden the hearts of the human race, to shut down the avenue for Messiah. We see there was only one righteous man left on the earth, and God acts to keep open avenues for Messiah through Noah. Abraham trusts God and left his family, moved to a new land, had a promised child in his old age. Abraham, through trust, experiences a new heart, becomes the father of the faithful. And his family were God's chosen helpers through which Messiah would come. The focus of the Bible narrows down now on this branch of the human family. Satan focuses energies on trying to destroy and corrupt this branch of the family in order to prevent Messiah from coming. Next, Sarah trusted God and was healed of infertility and was enabled to become a mother at age 90. Again, God's plan to bring forth Messiah carried forward by people who trusted him and were willing to cooperate with him. Isaac trusts God and voluntarily surrenders himself to be a sacrifice on Mount Moriah, cooperating with God to give the metaphorical evidence of the plan of salvation and help his father Abraham overcome his own fear and selfishness. This was Abraham's ultimate victory moment, or Abraham fully surrendered. Isaac was never going to be sacrificed.
Right.
This was an opportunity for Abraham to exercise faith, and Isaac trusted God and enabled the lesson to go forward, and Abraham to have this victory and be sealed. Jacob, who struggled through his life with fear and selfishness, but who, with God's help, wrestled against his own fear and selfishness and gained the victory by trusting in God over himself. And his name was changed to Israel, one who with God overcomes. That's what Israel means. We see in Jacob's life how Satan tempted him to give up and do things his own way, to give up on God, do things his own way. He's always calculating, always plotting, always trying to make it happen. And was how Satan was working to corrupt Jacob with selfishness, but God kept working to get him the victory and be the avenue for Messiah.
Well, you see that in Abraham and Sarah as well.
Yep.
I mean, Abraham lied about Sarah, her relationship with him. Sarah brought Hagar into the marital bed, and then learned from that lesson.
Yep.
So I mean, there's learning. Consequences are suspended. Learning is occurring. All these people.
So add that one in. Satan tempts them to bring in Hagar to try to corrupt the avenue for which Messiah is going to come.
Right.
Okay. So again, you see that the theme of the coming Messiah is the key to understanding all these stories in the back channel of what's happening. Joseph. we see Satan working to destroy the branch of the human family by stirring up jealousy in Joseph's brothers, who inspires them to sell him as a slave. I personally believe that the famine that struck was of Satan's doing. You get evidence in places like the book of Job that Satan does have the ability to affect the weather. Okay? And so if the famine, they die by starvation, he snuffs out this branch of the family. And so I think Satan is working through starvation, but God works through Joseph, who trusts him, to put him in a place where he can provide the resources to keep open the branch of the family for the Messiah to come. Yes.
Were there any prophecies at that point detailing that Judah was the son that the Christ was, the Messiah was going to come through, or might Satan have thought Joseph was the favored one of
Well, there is an early prophecy that Judah would be the one. I don't remember if it was before. It's in Genesis, but I don't know if it's before or after. So I have to go check that. But there's an early prophecy that the will not depart from Judah. I think it was actually Jacob giving that prophecy at the end of his life, so it might not have been given quite yet.
Yeah, so
and
it
Joseph,
could be the Satan thought Joseph was the favored one and thought he was the avenue for the Messiah.
And he was the one who was getting the dreams from God.
Right.
So it could have been exactly attacking Joseph for that reason as well. God permitted all this to happen to keep open avenue for Messiah. And then Moses. There was a prophecy early on that to Abraham that his descendants would be slaves. That was early on. Okay, so this is God foresaw. Moses, after God's victory over Satan's plan through Joseph, Satan has to starve him out. Tries to destroy Joseph. Joseph's elevated. Joseph stores food. Joseph protects the rest of the family line. Satan's foiled again. And so Satan now stirs up new leadership in Egypt. After God blesses them in Goshen, they move to Goshen. They multiply and increase in numbers. And God stirs up the new leadership in Egypt.
Satan stirs up
Excuse
the
me.
leadership.
Thank you. Satan stirs up new leadership in Egypt. Who is jealous of the children of Israel and therefore enslaves them in order to demoralize them, to harden their hearts, to sear their consciences, and to corrupt them into pagan worship practices. God sends Moses, but Satan inspires Pharaoh to kill all the male babies to try to shut down the deliverer and keep the people enslaved in order to destroy and prevent the Messiah from coming. God intervenes, places Moses in Pharaoh's family to give Moses the great education in organizational systems and governing lots of people. Moses is tempted, though, to use his own strength and goes out and murders an overseer, and Satan uses this to undermine Moses' own confidence and the people in Moses, and Moses flees into the wilderness. But God is not done with Moses, and God continues to develop him over the next 40 years to prepare him to be someone who trusts him completely and leads the people out of slavery, establish these people as God's helpers in the plan of salvation. Throughout this entire story, we can see the struggle between God working to bring the Messiah and Satan working to destroy the branch of the human family, the false gods of Egypt corrupting the minds of the Hebrews, the 10 plagues designed to show that all those beliefs and those gods were false in order to turn the hearts and minds back to the true God, Yahweh, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram leading a rebellion to try to get the people to turn against Yahweh, and God intervening to remove the source of rebellion to keep the people on path towards keeping open the plan of salvation, the golden calf, and then the destruction of the golden calf, making them drink it. Okay, showing that this is just nothing. Again, teaching them and keeping open path for Messiah. The next thing listed in Hebrews 11 is the people passing through the Red Sea and the Egyptian army drowning in the Red Sea. By faith, they passed through the Red Sea. Satan driving the Egyptian army. We couldn't corrupt them. We couldn't destroy them. We couldn't harden their hearts. They're being let out. The plan of salvation is still going forward. The Messiah is still coming. Let's kill them all. Let's send this army after them, kill them all. And so God opens the avenue for them to pass through the Red Sea and puts the Egyptian army in the grave, keeping open avenue for Messiah. This is not an act of punishment. It's an act of keeping open avenue for Messiah. Rahab, listed next, hid the spies and lied. She lied in faith. I always like to say that. Took faith. She trusted God. She put herself on God's side. Acted in a way that was willing to sacrifice her own life. God works to establish Israel as his agents for the communication of truth to free hearts and minds from sin and ultimately the arrival of the Messiah, Satan works through these pagan groups to try and destroy Israel, infect them further. So what we see happening now, either pagan worship practices will be embraced, or the people go to war and try to hurt them. So God is working to remove these influences from Israel to keep open avenue for Messiah. But I want you to notice something. God, as demonstrated by what he did with Sodom and Gomorrah, had the capacity to simply annihilate and eradicate entire population. He could have done that. But God's actions to keep open avenue for Messiah are always the least amount necessary. He didn't eradicate all the people in Canaan. He didn't have them come out and come into an uninhabited land and just move in. He took out or intervened in the least amount possible, like a surgeon who excises the least amount of tissue to get rid of the cancer. Okay? Because God is not about punishing sin or killing people. He is about keeping open avenue for Messiah to save people. That's the storyline. You see the next one, Gideon. And what's the theme? Same theme. Satan stirs up enemies trying to destroy the people, the avenue for Messiah. God uses Gideon to drive them back and keep open avenue for Messiah. Barak, same thing. Sisera was inspired by Satan to try and destroy God's people, closing the avenue for Messiah. Deborah instructs Barak to oppose Sisera, and God gives him the victory, keeping open avenue for Messiah. Samson, next one. We see, in other words, I want you to see this. It's a complete integrated, one-story line. God calls Samson to be a champion, to hold back the Philistines and the enemies of God, but Satan attacks and corrupts Samson through lust and selfishness. Samson, in the end, still destroys many of God's enemies and negates some of their influence, keeping open avenue for Messiah. Jephthah, same thing. Many people miss the story of Jephthah.
That's a tough one.
It's not really tough when you understand the theme, because here's the theme. Satan inspires at the time of Jephthah the Ammonites to attack Israel, seeking to destroy the people of Israel, shutting down the avenue for Messiah. But through Jephthah, he trusts God, and he leads the forces of Israel against the Ammonites, driving them back, thus keeping open the avenue for Messiah. That's the point.
Oh, I'm thinking of a different story.
No,
then.
the Jephthah story, then he says, and thanks you for this victory. Whatever comes out first in my home,
Okay,
I will.
so it is the same guy.
Yes, it's the same guy. But it wasn't about that.
Right.
It was showing that even though his faith really wasn't necessarily so matured, and of course there's arguments whether he did offer his daughter or not, but that's not the point. Jephthah's not there because of his daughter. He's there because by faith God was able to use him to stop the destruction of the Messiah's family line and keep open the avenue for Messiah. That's why he's there. David, Satan works through the Philistines to try and destroy Israel. God, thus closing the avenue for Messiah. God works through David to kill Goliath, to rout the Philistines. Satan corrupts Saul and seeks to use Saul to shut down to kill David. Thus destroying the avenue for Messiah. But God again preserves David, seeking to keep open avenue for Messiah. So do you see, from start to finish, this is the key to understanding Scripture. There's one Scripture overriding story. Yes, there are immediate context. Something's happening in that life, but there is an overarching theme of Scripture. And if we don't have that overarching theme of Scripture, then we read these stories and draw false conclusions. Further, if we have the false law construct, we read this as God punishing unbelievers while he's rewarding the believers. No, that's why I gave you the history of China, history of the Chauvin group in South America. God wasn't punishing these people during the same time in history because God is not the source of inflicted punishment for sin. God, the whole story is focusing on Messiah, the seed of the woman, who will crush the serpent's head and bring life and immortality to light. Let's go ahead and close with prayer.